Christine Lagarde, the self-proclaimed Madame Crisis, cynically announces the collapse of global stability with certainty, warning of a fragmented world where relentless economic and political shocks will become the new grim normal. Inequality fuels the extremes, while Europe is trapped in its own indecision, unable to control its destiny. Her stay at the helm of the European Central Bank until 2027 suggests a mission to manage upcoming disasters that the elite already knows about. The ground is giving way, and bank diplomacy is simply preparing the ground for a permanent state of emergency. The old world is dead, only chaos remains. It is well known that Erdogan is currently eager to acquire the Stealth 35 fighter jets from the United States, as this would allow him to gain expertise for the domestic KAN fighter jet, and he will also demand that the first 5 of these jets be delivered to him immediately. He already paid for it before his country was removed from the program years ago over the Russian S-400s. Specifically, the issue of acquiring know-how from the F-35S for the Turks by copying it into the domestic KAN fighter jet is preferable. Washington should take this very seriously. Does President Erdogan believe that by acquiring the F-35S, combined with a rapid development of his country's defense industry, he will be able to impose his will? Fait accompli in the Aegean, the South, and the Eastern Mediterranean? For this reason, the Turkish press supports the Turkish president and the acquisition of the American fighter jets, putting forward various arguments. In this context, in a related article, the International Turkish News Agency mentions, among other things, the delivery to Turkey of the F-35 aircraft, for which it has already paid. Erdogan tells Bloomberg her return to the program is vital for stronger United States and NATO defense ties. Regarding the possible purchase of F-16 Block 70 aircraft from the United States, Erdogan emphasized that Ankara expects the terms to be in line with the spirit of the NATO alliance, citing as an example the purchase of Eurofighter aircraft by Turkey. Geopolitical fate requires Greece, Cyprus, Israel, and the powerful United States lobbies to block the sale of F-35S to Turkey at all costs. If failure is inevitable, security guarantees become vital. At the same time, Athens must implement a Plan B for the immediate acquisition of fighter jets, balancing the Turkish threat. Finally, our country must abandon passivity and take a leading role by sending military forces to Gaza as a guarantor of regional stability. In a blazing neighborhood, a fierce hybrid war has broken out against Russian oil tankers from south of Crete in the eastern Mediterranean, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And this, according to unconfirmed sources, Moscow will not let go unanswered. Russia is planning to send nuclear submarines and naval personnel to the North Sea to respond to the illegal seizure of Iranian, Chinese, and Russian oil tankers in the North Sea by the United States. Russia is preparing to seize oil tankers flying the American flag in the North Sea, the Black Sea, and the Baltic Sea. Amidst American forces boarding a Russian oil tanker escorted by a Russian submarine and warship in the North Sea and attempting to seize it, Russia, China, and Iran will jointly pay for their military expenses against ships connected to the European Union and the United States that belong to the Russian Navy. The United States Coast Guard has declared war against Russian and Chinese oil tankers in the Caribbean Sea. The United States Coast Guard seized another oil tanker connected to Russia and Venezuela, the Sofia, in the Caribbean Sea. Russian experts at Aviapro note that such dawn raid tactics in the Caribbean and the Atlantic indicate that the United States is turning to a policy of open maritime piracy. Wherever commercial ships do not comply with the United States sanctions model, they become legitimate targets for Coast Guard boardings. The planet is turning into a jungle where the strongest imposes their law by force. Donald Trump, in a move reminiscent of other dark times, ordered a new 5th in a row, 2 hours of bread on an oil tanker, disregarding the consequences. On Friday morning, American forces seized the tanker Alina in the Caribbean, setting up a warlike scene that smells of gunpowder and threatens to blow relations with Russia sky high. Under the pretext of combating the Dark Fleet and sanctions against Venezuela, Trump unleashed his Marines in a pre-dawn operation. They took off from the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford. Supported by an entire amphibious strike group, the Americans set foot on Alina, which was formerly called Minerva M, and had already been targeted by Washington for transporting Russian oil. The statement from Southern Command is provocative. They say there is no safe haven, while acting as if the ocean is their personal scar. A fierce hybrid war has broken out against Russian tankers from south of Crete, in the eastern Mediterranean, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And this, according to unconfirmed sources, Moscow will not let go unanswered. That's right. Russia is planning to send nuclear submarines and naval personnel to the North Sea to respond to the illegal seizure of Iranian, Chinese, and Russian oil tankers in the North Sea by the United States. Russia is preparing to seize oil tankers flying the American flag in the North Sea, the Black Sea, and the Baltic Sea, amidst American forces boarding a Russian oil tanker that is being escorted by a Russian submarine and a warship in the North Sea and attempting to seize it. Russia, China, and Iran will jointly cover their military expenses against ships connected to the European Union and the United States that belong to the Russian Navy. The United States Coast Guard has declared war against Russian and Chinese oil tankers in the Caribbean Sea. The Coast Guard, I said, seized another oil tanker connected to Russia and Venezuela, the Sofia, in the Caribbean Sea. Russian experts at Aviapro note that such dawn raid tactics in the Caribbean and the Atlantic suggest a shift. I told him it's an open policy of maritime piracy. Wherever commercial ships do not comply with the United States sanctions model, they become legitimate targets for Coast Guard landings. Britain, in a desperate move for survival, is leading a European plan for a military landing in Greenland, attempting to counter Trump's expansionist ambitions. Under the pretext of the Russian threat, London, Paris, and Berlin are planning the deployment of NATO forces to protect the island's rare resources from American annexation. Conflict is inevitable, and Donald Trump is threatening to use force, while the 75-year-old NATO alliance is heading toward final collapse. The military exercises in the Arctic are the last stronghold before chaos, as Europe struggles to stay standing in a world that is being brutally torn apart. Europe is preparing for a violent rift with the United States, as the threat of NATO's weakening by Donald Trump sparks scenarios of economic and military war. The European Union is planning sanctions against tech giants Google, Meta, and banks, while the possibility of the fateful expulsion of American forces from European bases is on the table. While Marco Rompi is making firefighting contacts, Trump's strategy for Greenland reveals a cynical power negotiation. At the same time, British defense in the Arctic is collapsing, with officials admitting their alarming incompetence. The old order is dying, leaving Europe exposed to chaos. The European Union is planning sanctions against technology companies, while the fate of European bases is also on the table. The global geopolitical stage is heating up, and this time the fire is burning. The European Union is planning sanctions against technology giants, while the possibility of expulsion is also on the table. Of American forces from European bases. The Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, responded with a harshness rarely seen among NATO allies. "We are not for sale. It is absurd and unreal." The European Union is planning technological sanctions, while the possible expulsion of American forces from European bases is also on the table. The European Union is planning sanctions against technological giants, while the possible expulsion of American forces is also being considered. European bases. The European Union is planning sanctions against technological giants, while the expulsion of American forces is also on the table. European bases, European Union, technological giants, while on the table are American forces, European bases,